back here to my appointed spot here. We have to move this thing back. For those who always wonder why this is back here, that camera, especially on Wednesday night, it cuts across here. Mike and Sue tend to sit there and they make a lot of comments. If this is up, it's in the way, you don't see them. If they would move to a different spot, Matt could be closer, but it cuts the angle on that camera. If we had a camera over here, we could change things again. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Put half a roll on Matt and then put the other half on the pews. That's probably a good idea. Hadn't thought about that. Diagonal across there and tie Matt to a spot. I can move it up, but Matt can't because I don't have it. I can probably move up 2 spots, can't I? We can move the camera angle, but it's just you can't really. Like I said, they sit there, just block stuff. So, you know how effective it is to get people to move in this church? They might move. That's a psychological thing of this class too. As I learned as I started teaching the auditorium class long ago, unprepared as I was, people sit at the corners. And it wasn't so bad when I was young and mobile. Without the cameras, I walk back and forth. With the camera and you try to stay on frame, you're almost in a peripheral vision. So it's a psychological thing. It's the spots. All right, so anyways, we continue our study of the life of Christ. Our outline, we use the chronological study of the life of Jesus by Gene Taylor. Fulfilled Gospel, McGarvey's kind of path that he took with that. We're on chapter 25 of 26. So, 26 chapters, we're on chapter 25. But if you know anything about the life of Christ, it comes to an end at some point. It's just, that's all the farther it's going to go. So, and we're in the trials is where we're at. Chuck covered the first 2 Jewish trials last week, and I'm going to cover the third one. Actually, I thought I was moving on to Roman trials, but it's the third one. So we're going to cover that, and I got some stuff on Judas' suicide. You could put it kind of in other places, but in the text, it was in one spot, so we'll follow up with that. I'm not a big guy on talking about suicide, so we'll talk about it, and we'll see from there. So, Gospels are typically parallel. Matthew 27:1, when morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. Mark 15, verse 1, first part. As soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council. Luke 22, verse 66, beginning. When day came, the assembly of the elders of the people gathered together, both chief priests and scribes, and they led him away to their council. So what time of day is it? It's about sunrise. It's daybreak. It's morning. It ain't late in the morning. This is when I like to get up morning. So I do not like to get up really early. There's a whole another story on that. But anyways, it's daytime, but it's morning. What did the Jews normally do on that day? What day is it? Let me ask that question first. What day is it, and what did the Jews normally do on that day? It's the day before he's crucified. It's the day of... he's crucified at sundown, basically, so you're right. To our calendar, it's... So, yeah, so this is sun up, and he's crucified about sundown, before that, he hangs on there till he's dead at 3, yeah. So, this is Friday. Yeah, they're getting ready for Passover. They're preparing for Passover. That helps. Do we know what day it is? The Jews called it the day of preparation. It was when you would choose your lamb, prepare the lamb. It would be you get ready for Passover. That's what the day was spent as doing. So that was the day. These particular Jews, the chief priests, the scribes, the Jews of Jews, chose to do something different for the day. Some, if you kind of look at it the right way, and they took the day to prepare the lamb, different lamb. So that's where they're at. What had Jesus been through overnight? 2 trials, 2 long trials. The The Bible doesn't put much stuff in there. You know there's more to it than what he heard. There's a lot of conversations, accusations, eyewitnesses, whatever. I mean, the trials, they bring enough people together, and they weren't a 15-minute, nope, he looks guilty to me. It was more than that, I think. That's kind of the way I would look at it. But he's been up all night through 2 trials. Who led those trials? They were before 2 guys? Annas and Caiaphas. Yeah. Caiaphas, I don't know how to say it. Whatever. Caiaphas is the dad of Annas, is that right? Or is Annas the dad? Father-in-law. One's the chief priest, or the high priest, and the other one is the former high priest. Is that right?
Yeah, it doesn't say it, but then when they slapped him, they said, don't you know he's the high priest?
Yeah.
Which means he was sometime a high priest. Yeah.
Those 2 guys led it. It's one of them's house, isn't it? Caiaphas' house. There's been 2 different places and 2 different trials. Same guys. What does the council of elders, chief priests, and scribes plan to do? What's their big goal for the day?
Death.
Put him to death. That's the plan. That's the plan. Matthew 27:1 says they took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. We've had these trials because we want to, and today's the day. Night trials have been illegal. If you didn't get that, Chuck said that. I'll say it again. They were illegal. You weren't allowed to have trials at night. Why? Could you get everybody there that needed to be there? I mean, we don't hold trials at night, right? No. Could you bring in, I don't know, whoever? It's just, you can't do things as well. There's one thing, but they didn't do them at night. Trials of any kind were prohibited on the day of preparation. So just to compound it, they're having a trial here in the morning. This is illegal because that's not what you're supposed to do that day. You're supposed to be preparing for Passover. Couldn't they have picked a better time for this? Another time? Couldn't have done it a week earlier? Couldn't have done it a week later?
And when he came in, riot.
It would have been a riot. You're right. When he came in, the triumphal entry, that previous Sunday, it would have been a riot if they snagged him off the streets right there. Snagged him off the streets, left the peppermint and the stuff just laying, and the bubble gum that they're throwing out, I guess they're not really doing that, but you know what I'm saying. It's a parade. It's a life of life. But everybody's there. It would have been a riot if they snagged him then. This all goes along with prophecy. Like I said, he is the Passover lamb. This is when it happens. But they're trying to be as legitimate as they can. They're holding trials, so it looks like it's legit. But they're breaking all kinds of rules that look at hypocrisy, is really what it really is. It's not.
Time. This one, he knows it's his time.
It's his time. He knows. It is what it is. Luke 22, 66b and 67a, we're going to move to Luke 22 for most of it, because most of the other Gospels had like one verse. And they said, if you are the Christ, tell us. So Jesus is on trial in front of the Sanhedrin. Is this the first time they've asked this question? It's not the first time. They word it 100 different ways, right? It's about like my mom trying to find the truth out of me, right? This is kind of how things go. If you're the Christ, tell us. It's not even a question. It's not the first time. They know. He knows. Everybody there knows.
He did it with Caiaphas. He said, if you are, tell us. And he says, I see myself sitting at the right hand of God. And then they just lost their minds.
Yeah, they lost their minds. He told them, he said, this is where I see myself. Well, that would say that you're the Son of God. And they blew up. Yeah. What's he charged with? Blasphemy. That's it. He's charged with blasphemy.
It depends on who it is.
It depends on who it is.
If the Jews are talking to the Romans, it's sedition.
Yeah.
If it's within themselves, it's blasphemy.
Yeah. Well, within themselves, they really just, they got a million reasons to be mad. But yeah, Chuck's right. Blasphemy, Blasphemy is insulting God. That's blasphemy. If you show contempt for God, show lack of reverence for God, that's blasphemy. So they are charging him with blasphemy because he says he's God. So, if I'm God, but I have faults in my life, I've lowered God to me. That's an insult. It shows contempt. There's lack of reverence. God isn't God if it comes down to my level. So this is what they've charged him with, is basically calling himself God. Like Chuck says, when it shifts over to the Romans, blasphemy, the Romans don't care about blasphemy. They don't care about the God of the Jews. They don't care about God. They don't care about contempt of God. They have to change that to make the Romans upset. So we're here, basically, he says he's God. He says he's the Son of God. When he goes to the Romans, he says he's the king. That's basically the charge there. It's sedition. He's leading a new army. He's leading a new country. He's leading, So he says he's God. He says he's the king. They're kind of the two charges, or what basically. But you see that both. That's our confession when we're baptized, when we put on Christ. Do you believe he's the Son of God? We say he is. Is he going to be Lord of our life? Is he going to be king? He is. So he's both. But anyways. So that's how they see him as blasphemous, because he says he's God. They said it lowers it to man's level. Moving on to the last half of verse 67 and 68, Luke 22. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will not believe, and if I ask you, you will not answer. So in answer, if you're Christ, tell us. And he says, if I tell you, you're not going to believe me. If I ask you who I am, you're not even going to answer. Is this the first time he's answered the question? They've asked it 1,000 times. He's answered the question 1,000 times. Did they believe him at any time in the past? No. That's what he says. You're not going to believe me if I tell you? Mostly no. And I like that answer.
Kind of came around. Joseph of Arimathea obviously came around too.
Yeah, Joseph of Arimathea. Nicodemus, those two guys came around. There's other points where you see priests believed, as the gospel spreads. There are people who believed. I think there were probably people that believed and knew, but went with the mob. They went with the mob, which is a hard place to be. Anyways, so, by and large, they're still after him. How could he switch the question to ask them? What words would he use to switch this question if he could ask them? They want to know, are you the Son of God? What would he ask them? Who do you say that I am? That's a good question. Yeah. Do you say that I'm the Son of God? Who do you say I am? If I'm not the Son of God, who do you say I am? So he has. He's done this kind of thing before. He's switched it on them. That doesn't go over too well of people with authority, but that's, who's got more authority. Verse 69, but from now on, the Son of Man shall be seated at the right hand of the power of God. Did he answer the question? Same answer as before. Am I the Son of God? The Son of Man will be in heaven at the right hand of God. That's where I'm going. This is where I'll be. He answered the question. Do they understand it? I think they understand it. Do they believe it is a different question. But you answer that, they know that's where the Son of Man will go. That's where the Son of God will be. They got to understand it. But do they believe it's him? That's a whole different thing. Verse 70, so they all said, are you the Son of God then? And he said to them, you say that I am. So how did the Sanhedrin rephrase the question? And what gave a clue that the Sanhedrin understood the answer? They added the word then, didn't they? We heard what you said. Are you the Son of God? Are you saying, because of your answer, are you saying that you're the Son of God? Because the word then kind of shifts it. It ties it back to the answer. That's, at least they understood what he said. Who's really guilty here? And is it blasphemy? Not blasphemy for Jesus, right? Because he says he's the Son of God, but he is the Son of God. It doesn't lower God. He is. It's a true statement. So he's not really guilty of blasphemy?
Lying.
Right. You say that I am. So you're right. They would charge him with perjury, lying under oath. If he said that, yeah, I'm the Son of God, you're right. They would slap that charge on him because they didn't believe it either. You say that I am. So who's really guilty here? If you can see that Jesus is the Son of God, but you choose not to believe that, are you guilty? You're guilty of everything. That's the sad thing. You're guilty.
To belittle God.
You're right.
What are they doing?
Yeah. If you're at this point, you're blasphemer because you're belittling God. You're saying God couldn't send his Son. God couldn't pay the ultimate price for sin. This couldn't be. We wouldn't chose this guy. We're bigger than God. We talked about that one Wednesday night. The Pharisees become God. They set in their own set of rules. They become bigger than God. So, yeah, the blasphemy really falls on them for making God less than he really is. Verse 77, then they said, is it 77? Why did I skip 6 verses? I don't think it's 77. Oh, well. Then they said, what further testimony do we need? We have heard it ourselves from his own lips. They said he's guilty and he's worthy of death. That's got to be 71. But anyways, that's what they said. We don't need more testimony. We've heard it from ourselves. You said you're guilty and you're worthy of death. Except they don't have the ability to do the death penalty. It's not within their jurisdiction. The Romans took that away from them. They have the laws that say they can stone people for this, they can kill people for that, but that's not the case anymore. It's not 77, is it? No. It doesn't matter. So they send them on to the Romans. Romans have the authority to do that kind of thing, but the Jews don't.
I really don't think the Pharisees wanted to be the ones to kill him.
Oh, no.
Because they could stone him. The Romans didn't do anything when they stoned people. They didn't walk down there.
They stoned Stephen.
That's right. They wanted the Romans to do it.
We're holding themselves up. We uphold the law of God. And clearly in Leviticus it says, if someone blasphemes, you are to stone them. So are you holding to the law of God or not?
No.
You know, they're breaking his laws. Just saying we're upholding him. You know, it's just the hypocrisy is unbelievable.
Yeah, they're full of hypocrisy. They've broken all kinds of laws. They've broken all kinds of rules to kill Jesus. And like I said, the law against blasphemy is stoning him. Nobody picks up a stone. Nobody just drags him outside. They haven't tried. But they want to look right. Like I said, they want to avoid a riot. They want that pushed off on somebody else. The day that somebody gets upset, they killed him, not us. You know, they set him up for it, but they did the dirty work. Maybe everybody will forget all this. Unfortunately, it's written in 4 gospel accounts. So 2,000 years later, we still know who's guilty of that. Matthew 27:2, they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor. Mark 15:1b, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. Luke 23:1, when the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate. And John 18:28, then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. They take him to Pilate. Pilate's the prosecutor, the governor of Judea. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that people can put together about him. He's not a great guy. He had previously insulted the Jews by bringing in the Roman standards into Jerusalem. Roman standard typically has an eagle on it, graven image, which is, right there you've broken another commandment. So the Jews don't like him. He took them back out for fear of a riot. Pilate is not on their side, and he's not somebody that they like, but that's who they brought him to. He's the prosecutor, he's the governor. He's probably the guy dirty enough to get the job done. I don't know if they had another choice, but he's that guy.
There's only one guy that's above the governor.
The emperor's the one above the governor. So, yeah, he's not a friend of the Jews. So, but he'll afraid of the Jews too. Remorse and suicide of Judas. Matthew 27, 3 through 4. Gospel account puts Judas' suicide right there. Matthew's the only one that covers that suicide. The notes that we're using, it puts it down a little bit later. And they for some reason, they go into 2 Roman trials, I think, before they get to Judas' suicide. Looking at some of the notes and stuff, McGarvey says basically the timeline's when it is. Kaufman says it happened when it happened and hard to tell when. I just went ahead and covered it because, like I said, it's the next verse right there. It's easier than putting it later. It seems out of place to cover his suicide in the middle of the Roman trials. So we'll cover it right now. Which is it? You know it's true. Let's just leave it at that. But the beginning of it says, then when Judas the betrayer saw that Jesus was condemned, and that kind of leads me to believe they just condemned him to death, and it leads the next verse into this. It leads me to believe it happens at this time frame. Or at least, it happens that day. Like I said, Chuck says, the first trials, the last Jewish trials in the morning, daybreak or so, they put him on the cross, by noon or so? Is that right? By noon, so maybe 6 hours time, the priests and stuff would have gone back on. They might have been there for the Roman trials. They definitely were there for the Roman trials, but they kind of did some of their stuff. It would have been, they weren't necessarily in charge of everything at this point. Busy morning after a busy night. And when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind, and he brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. Why do you think the Sanhedrin didn't use his testimony during the trials? We looked at the trials, but did anybody ever say, and they put Judas on the stand as a witness? They were trying to pay people to bring false accounts. Why do you think they didn't use his testimony?
I don't think they could trust him.
You can't trust a guy but he's after money, he takes bribery. You can't really trust that guy all the way.
They had no idea what he was going to say or did. He didn't have an idea what he was going to. He thought he did.
Yeah, he thought he did, but you're right. I think you're right. I think he didn't have any idea really what he'd say or do. Right here, he changes his mind. I've sinned by betraying innocent blood.
They don't need him.
Yeah, they are dependable liars, and they know dependable liars. They don't need one they didn't need him. So, go ahead.
The pieces of silver was supposedly to identify him. Wasn't to charge him. He didn't go up and say, this is the Son of God, I'm going to kiss him on the cheek.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were paying him to do that. They paid him to do what they paid him to do. And I don't think Judas thought it through. I don't think he thought it was going to have the ending that it did. He'd seen Jesus rescue himself otherwise. He was greedy, but he was also very naive.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that too. I think. Well, ask a question. You think Judas might have expected a different outcome? His job was to point out who Jesus was, although they knew who he was. It wasn't for them to establish that Jesus said he was the Son of God.
In my mind, he kind of thought, first and foremost, he was a thief. He was embezzling all the time through the treasury they had. So money was his big temptation. But I think, he watched what happened in Nazareth. They were going to throw him off the cliff. He knew he could just walk away from them. Mm-hmm. No problem. And he was shocked to actually see that he's going through the trials.
Yeah. Because everything. Yeah, I think you're right. He probably was shocked. Like I said, he got out of stuff before. He walked through a crowd. People have been chasing him for 3 years. They've been hounding him and stuff, and he turns it on them. I don't think you're probably right. Naive enough to not realize it was going to go to this far, and thinking Jesus will just, like Abraham and Isaac, right? God will provide a way. I mean, Judas, when you look at the account at the Lord's Supper, he's also described as the one whom he loved. So don't look at him as a terrible, rotten guy all the way through and through. Weak, human. We're all that way, right?
Thing about it was is he repented. He says, I betrayed innocent blood, but Jesus said it'd been better if he'd never been born.
Yeah. He saw it more than anybody. 3 years of seeing it every day in, day out. He knows exactly what he saw. McGarvey said that Judas possibly even stood in the midst of the enemies of Jesus because he wasn't afraid of them. He was probably at the trials. Was he or not? The gospel accounts don't say. But he could have been there through it. Like you said, to see what would happen, not believe in it, he could have been nearby.
It's just enough to keep him infuriated. He doesn't defend himself, but he does keep them furious.
Oh, yeah. You're right. He never defends himself. He does keep them furious. He makes sure it happens. It gets to the point that it has to happen. They can't back down. How do you feel about Judas' state of mind in his statement? I have sinned, and it says he changed his mind. He says, I've sinned and betrayed innocent blood. How do you feel about that? What's his state of mind? How do you think he feels? We kind of talked about it, but
I think the reality of what he did just kind of sunk in.
yeah, I'll give you that. I think
Right.
Right.
Situation.
Yep.
it's got to be overwhelmed. Yeah, I don't think he thought he was going to go that far. Yeah, this is all my fault. If I could teach the kids on my soccer team that way, go to the outside, not up the middle. They kick the ball to the middle, the other team scores. Learn from that, It's minor compared to this, but you realize what you did all of a sudden in life. It's costly. Some translations use repented instead of changed his mind. Which Greek word do you think appears in the text? Metanoio? Yeah, I don't even know. This is not today that you try to guess it. Metanoio? How about that? Metanoio means to know after, or metamalomai, to care after. And I'll put it, the sentence is, I think it's McGarvey. No, it's Barnes. He who has changed his mind about the past, metanoio, is in the way to change everything. He who has an aftercare, metamalomai, may have little or nothing more than a selfish dread of the consequences of what he's done. So did he repent that he saw what he did and wants to change his way? Or is this the fact that he saw what he did and he knows he's going to pay a huge price for this and he wishes he'd turned around and done something better? Is it just the knowledge of the after knowledge of what he's done that makes him change his mind? Or is that he cares and wants to repent? Any guesses? Can you see the difference?
Still being selfish.
Still being selfish. The word that's used is, he knows it's the aftercare. He sees the penalty. That's the change of mind. It doesn't want to face that penalty. I have sinned. I betrayed innocent blood. It's not so much that I wish I could go back. I see what this is all causing. If Judas wants forgiveness, where should he have taken his confession? Where did he take his confession, and where should he have taken his confession?
Sanhedrin.
He goes to Sanhedrin, he goes to the priest and stuff, says, I've sinned, I've taken innocent blood. I want forgiveness.
Jesus.
Should have come to Jesus himself, right?
Who he wronged.
A, he's the one who's wrong, and B, he's also, as we know from the rest of the story, he's the one that gives forgiveness. So he goes to the priest. It's not, and that's really the part of the deal there. He's not going to where he really wants that repentance. It's he's wanting to get out of the penalty.
Sure that he understood. Even the apostles did not understand the forgiveness that Jesus could bring them until after he rose from the dead. So why would we expect Judas to think anything different than that? He was a result of his culture. I personally think he had remorse. He returned what he took. Think of us today. If we steal something and we have remorse, you take your kid to the store, he steals something, and you tell him to take it back. And he's taking it back because he got caught, because the results aren't the same. But he doesn't know what to do beyond that. And I'm not sure Judas knows what to do beyond that. He's not the day of Pentecost where they said the same thing. And then what must we do to be saved? He didn't have that option. This was before Christ had risen from the dead.
Yeah, you're right.
The old law. And so you have to sometimes put yourself in perspective of the world they lived in.
Yeah.
He was just totally, I think he honestly didn't know what to do. He realized what he'd done. Now he couldn't get to Jesus for one thing. He knew he couldn't get to Jesus.
No.
He was not, that approach was gone away for a while.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you that. Like I said, that's the culture. That's where he had the option to go. He went back to the people that gave him that money. That's a good point. And it is. It's the same thing they say on the day of Pentecost. I find myself guilty of the death of the Son of God. Well, they're cut to the heart. What do we need to do to get right with God? And maybe he went back to preach with that same kind of message. What do I need to do to get right with God? Not a problem, buddy. Thanks anyways. What is that to us? See to it yourself. We don't really care. That's really their thing. What's it to us that you sinned? What is it to us that you've spilled innocent blood? Take care of yourself. Did they share his wish to undo what was done? No. It's already moved on. Matthew 27:5, and throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went, hanged himself. The casting of the silver is prophesied in Zechariah. Zechariah 11:12-13. Then I said to them, if it seems good to you, give me my wages. If not, keep them. And they weighed out my wages, as my wages 30 pieces of silver. And the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter. The lordly price at which I was priced by them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw it into the house of the Lord to the potter. It's already prophesied that these 30 pieces of silver, which are the price that was paid for giving up Jesus, the price of his life was 30 pieces of silver, essentially. And it's going to be cast back into the temple. Jesus' suicide is right here. He went he throws down the bags of silver since they wouldn't take it. He goes and hangs himself. In Acts 1, 18, and 19, gives you a little bit more things. It says, and falling headlong, he burst open in the middle, and all his bowels gushed out. It's pretty graphic, I know. The commentaries don't talk about his suicide. By and large, they just don't. He committed suicide. The ones that do, some of them point that he went out and did it hurriedly. Maybe the rope broke and he fell into a valley and shattered. Some say he hung there enough that his body was corrupted, and that's kind of the bowels gushed out. He went and did it by himself, however you want to look at it. He carried that burden with him, and that's what he saw fit to do. I won't even try to analyze suicide. That's not my thing. Talk to Camille about that stuff. That's her field, not mine. I don't know what affects. Anyways, we won't even do it. 27:6. But the chief priest, taking the piece of silver, said, it's not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it's blood money. Deuteronomy 23:18 is what's usually referenced with this. It says, "You shall not bring the fee of the prostitute or the wages of a dog into the house of the Lord your God in payment for any vow. For both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God." So what money is forbidden in the temple treasury? The temple treasury will not take money if you have done what? If you're a prostitute and it's the money you made last night, don't bring it to the temple. If you've sold your dog, don't take that money to the temple. I don't know why. If you sell your dog, don't bring that money to the temple. They don't want either one of it. What about the blood money thing? Is that in that verse? It's not there. This is the verse that's usually pointed to with that. It's not there. They made up their own rules. Unless you want to look at it as some kind of a prostitute thing. You've sold your own soul. You know, if you want to look at it that way. You sold the dog, Jesus himself. Mm-hmm. No, they weren't pets. It may refer to what was done. You know, the act of what was done, what was sold. I don't know, but it's not direct. Could they use temple money to hire false witnesses? They did. I don't think they shouldn't have, but they did. Should they use temple money to hire plot to murder the Son of God? They shouldn't have, but they did. So, you know, this is some self-righteousness. You know, the money we gave to you, we're okay spending that money. But you can't give it back because now it's blood money. We don't really know where you got it. You know, you got it from the temple. You got it from those guys. Verse 7 and 8, so they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. They take Judas' 30 pieces of silver and they purchase a piece of land. That land is called a field of blood. It's a potter's field. This is where they bury the poor. People don't have the money to bury themselves, or for families to bury them. They bury them in this potter's field. It says in Acts 1:19, it became known to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the field was called in their own language Akeldama, that is the field of blood. That's the Aramaic name, Akeldama. I probably said it wrong, but that's what it is. And it's a prophecy that was in Zechariah. The money would be thrown back in the temple. The money would be used to buy a piece of land, to throw it to the potter. That's where the money goes. Matthew 27:9-10, then was fulfilled that what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took 30 pieces of silver, a price of him on whom the price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave him to the potter's field, them for the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. It says in Matthew 27:9, it gives Jeremiah as a speaker of the prophecy that we see in Zechariah. And this is kind of not that Jeremiah said this. This is a binding of books. Jeremiah would have been part of that, Zechariah, all the minor prophets, some other ones, and they just referred to it as Jeremiah. It wasn't Jeremiah who said it, that was the set of books. All right, next week, Chuck's going to pick up with Roman trials. Always a good time. So, wear your white, wear your purple, pick your side. Always a good time. And which one of us will get stuck with having to say, crucify him? We'll both drag our feet, so the other one has to say it. So, all righty. Sing the